Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's Your Thought, a talk show for the youth by the youth. I am your host again, Isabel, and this is my co-host Marcus. And this is What's Your Thought, Season 3, Episode 3. Alright, so we are at our third episode of the third season, and I have a different guest. We have a different pairing today, and we are paired like this in this way because we actually have a very exciting guest with us here today. Everyone, I introduce you to Pastor Adrian.
Everyone.
So we are very, very excited to have him as a guest. Well, I'm sure you guys have seen the title. Today will be about the dark arts, and we are paired together today because we are actually very, very big fans of fantasy. We like to read a lot of Harry Potter, that type of stuff. So create fake wands and letters. So I'm not sure if you guys know, but Pastor Adrian actually has some experiences with the dark arts. But before we get into that, let us get a brief introduction to what the dark arts are.
Basically, what people call the dark arts or witchcraft, sorcery, are a way for people to affect our lives through supernatural ways not linked with God. We all have that desire to touch the supernatural. You see it throughout the world, whether it's a tribe in the rural forests somewhere or even in a city, there's always that desire more often than not to touch the supernatural. And so it's either through God or the other way is through what we call the dark arts or witchcraft or sorcery. Basically invoking spirits through certain rituals to access the supernatural. The Bible and archaeology has shown us that this system of beliefs have been around for millennia. The earliest record in the Bible would be when King Saul went to the witch of Endor to try to get her to communicate with the dead prophet Samuel's spirit. You go way further back, other historical records show it was very prevalent in ancient Egypt and Babylonia. You're talking about some records 2000 BC that speaks of witchcraft, that speaks of sorcery, and so that's basically what it is. But it basically comes down to different names, whether it's dark arts or sorcery or witchcraft, whatever name they come up with, is basically the same thing, a way to access the supernatural.
Well, Pastor, we all know that you have had a very long history with dark arts and sorcery and this sort of things. Pastor, we just wanted to ask, how did you come across sorcery?
I would say it would first have started with movies, and then later on books, And then it so happened I was also living as a child. We were living in an area and a house where there was a lot of demonic activity. You find these kind of places throughout the world, throughout certain areas of the world, you'll find such areas. These are usually places where there's some sort of atrocity has taken place, or a murder or a suicide or some kind of long-term rituals have taken place there. And so these kind of places generally have draw the demonic to them. And so we were living in such an area. If you go to Cambodia, we was a missionary in Cambodia for a few years, and you'll find such areas there. Malaysia, because of the communist insurgency and Japanese rule, you'll find areas like that throughout Malaysia. And Genesis 4 speaks about this. When the Bible says when Cain murdered his brother Abel, Genesis 4 says the ground cried out. And he was cursed, and the ground cried out. The ground ruined the blood and cried out. And so you will find, so it so happened I would say it was few events and circumstances that would draw me to that. Also, my nature is such, I want to bring some balance here. I want to bring some balance. You don't want to go off tangent. I'm always the type of person to do something crazy. I always like to experience new things and learn new things. I'm very curious by nature. I'm also a type of person that will try to beat a fear by actually doing it. I'm afraid of heights. I climb somewhere high and I look down, And so, of course, there's always the fear of the demonic, and such. So that was one thing. Also, by nature, I was more prone to violence because my dad was an abuser. He would threaten us with knives, throw us against the wall, beat us until the blood came. It was so. I would say I would always try to find ways to escape reality. I would always try to find ways to escape that unhappiness. And so I would say it was a combination of all of these things that would draw me towards the demonic, towards the supernatural.
I see. Well, you are obviously very knowledgeable in sorcery and all the dark arts. Can we just ask, on behalf of all the youth wondering, what rituals did you do when you were practicing the dark arts?
Actually, you don't really have to do any rituals. For me, I would just started talking with spirits when I was drunk. And I started drinking at a very young age. And so so I just see them and I start talking, have a conversation. They don't really talk much, but I start talking with them. Later on, it was cutting, sacrificing animals, and eventually I would give my own blood. I still have some scars on the body from that.
So are all these things just like dark arts and sorcery and all that? Is it essentially just making deals with the devil?
That's exactly what it is. All those, like I said, it's humanity. We are drawn to rituals. We like rituals. We like the pomp.
Yeah.
You see that throughout. We like the pomp, the grandeur of it. It's like, and we are drawn to such things, and so that's what they do. They make up. They say, no, you do this ritual and you do that, and you can. But you don't need to. I know that from experience. The demonic is all around us. They're right around us here at the moment. They're listening to everything, and all it takes is intent. All it takes is intent. So those rituals it's not really necessary, to access the spiritual realm. Intent is what's necessary. I would let me give you this example. Most deeper rituals to access the demonic, the spiritual realm, there's a blood sacrifice involved. I'm quite sure you all know about that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then of course human blood is the strongest one of all. Okay. You look at the guy in the market selling chicken, that go to Old Town Market and he's cutting the chicken for you, and it's a fresh chicken and he's got no problems. There's no demonic activity there, because he's cutting it with the intent of, listen, you want to buy my chicken to eat? You cut the same chicken with the intent of calling a spirit, and the whole dynamic change is intent. Meditation. I know I've spoken to some friends, and there's some form of martial arts where you meditate and you call in a spirit. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with martial arts. Let's bring some balance here. Okay, it's form of self-defense and assault. It's good, but sometimes they do that as a form of meditation where they actually call in the spirit. It's the intent behind it. One person performing martial arts with the aim of knowing how to fight or how to protect. Then there's another one with another aim. It's the intent behind it.
That's a very, very interesting point, the intent one. Because I remember a few years ago, I can't exactly remember what year, I was quite young. There was this trend on social media, and it was this thing where they would balance two pencils on top of each other,
Okay.
and then they would spin it, and they would try to call upon a spirit called Charlie.
Okay.
And some people, well, majority of them, nothing happened to them. But then some people fainted. I believe a guy in our school got affected. He fainted, and it was caught on camera, and it was very, very big thing.
Yeah.
So that explains the intent and all behind it. Yeah,
It's the intent. It's
very,
always the
very-
intent.
it's a very, very interesting point you pointed out.
That's
Yeah.
why I was like, bring some balance. You like there's nothing wrong with fantasy. I read fantasy.
Mm.
I like fantasy. I like fantasy. I like science fiction. I read a lot, and there's nothing wrong as long as you take it just as a book, as entertainment, as fiction, just something to pass the time and entertain. Take it in another arena. You take it with the intent that's like, what, maybe if I can do this, I can access. That changes the whole dynamic. It's always intent.
Now, I find it great that you mentioned books and movies and all that, because now we've had a brief of what dark arts are. So now let's move on to the effects of dark arts.
Okay.
So now, especially in our current generation, all these sorcery, witchcraft, and all that, they're often romanticized
Yep.
through movies, through books. For example, Harry Potter, which we are both a very, very big fan of. But is it like how it is in the movies?
No, it's not. And when you put it, I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. And it's, like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a book. It's entertainment, you know. But what the demonic has done, like especially with the movies, the devil is smarter than all of us. He's been around since before humanity, you know. And he now uses movies, those days was books or other things, to make people think that he's not as bad as he seems. Remember, he's the father of lies. And the aim is, I feel like Lucifer, that series that's come out, Lucifer, you know, the devil is actually a nice guy, and you know, actually God is doing certain things that's not so right, you know, but he's actually, Lucifer's a cool guy. Years back, there was a movie that came out called Michael, I think it was John Travolta, and then another one, Nicolas Cage, you know, and it depicted angels as being very depressed and down. Heaven is not such a nice place, you know, and make people think that angels are unhappy beings, which the Bible says is completely opposite. You know, because they're in the presence of God and they're always rejoicing, and you know, you want to get to heaven because it's perfect. They live there. But the aim behind these movies and the demonic is using this media to make people think, you know, that hey, maybe the devil isn't as bad as he seems. Maybe the demonic is not so bad. Maybe he's a cool guy. And then when people start thinking like that, they're going to do certain things. So they might get less fearful of doing certain rituals to access. And that's when he gets you. You know?
Well, speaking of Lord of the Rings, if one day I just start walking around and telling people that my ring can summon demons, would that affect me?
That's a good question. I have no idea. I have really no idea. It might not. It might not. I wouldn't mess around with it. It's one thing I've come to find out over the year when I was messing around with those things is you don't want to mess around with those kind of stuff. You know, it's okay. I guess you say you like making the wands and all that stuff. That's fine. It's entertainment. It's fun. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. But also there's a balance that you don't want to cross. You know, so you might be saying, and it might actually be a way for them to influence your life. You know, so it's very hard to say with the demonic. Like I said, they're smarter than us. What gives us protection against them is Jesus Christ, God. You know, and so when we do certain things, like you also saying, you're playing with that pen, summoning the spirit of Charlie. Some were affected, some weren't.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on the heart, the intent. You know, so whether it will or will not, I don't know. But I wouldn't take the risk because I've come to find out some of the things I did is like I didn't expect the effect it had, but it had an effect.
Now, speaking about, you know, wands and rings with magical powers and all that, could you cast spells, or can you use dark arts to cast spells on others?
Okay. I didn't do that because if I had a problem with anybody, I just beat them up or do something else to get back at them, you know. So I did not cast any spells on anybody or do any ritual to get back at somebody. But it can be done. I know of people, I know friends, personally know them who were involved in it before, and they would do it and it would work. You know, unless the person was protected. Like, you know, when you try to do it against a Christian and such, usually when the person is living for God and righteous, and that would be their protection against the demonic. You know? But if not, sometimes it would work. You know, it can be done.
Well, now we as Christians, we have learned many things about the demonic forces, like the pentagram and the goat horns. And a few years ago, we learned about music that when you put in reverse can show you hidden meanings.
Okay.
Could you just tell us some symbols that are correlated with witchcraft?
Again, smoke and mirrors. Okay, you don't really need those things to summon a demon. You know, like goat horns. You mentioned goat horns. Okay, it's a goat horn. You can use it as a decoration on a wall. You know, you got people who go hunting and there's a head of a bison or bear or tiger on your wall. You got paintings and such. And so, again, it's smoke and mirrors. You don't really need those things to access the demonic, you know, unless you want it to access the demonic. But of course, I wouldn't again mess around with the pentagram and such, because those things were actually, as far as I know, were created with the intent of accessing the spiritual realms, you know. So I wouldn't mess with those things. Again, it's a very gray area. Sometimes it affects, sometimes it doesn't. You know, I know sometimes people can put up a dream catcher and it doesn't have an issue. Sometimes they put it up and there is an issue.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very unknown thing. You know, and again about those symbols correlated with witchcraft and the demonic. There's quite a few around there, like you mentioned, pentagrams and, you know, goat's horns and such. But I wouldn't mess around with those things, like I said. You know, but not really necessary. You know, you don't need those things. Charlie again. I mean, we used to play that in school. Everyone summoning anything, we were just trying to point who will it point to, and we'll win a bet. For us, it was money. You know, whoever it points to, that person gets the money. You know, and nothing happened. You know, so does that answer your question?
Now, throughout what we've covered so far, and from your answers, you've actually been dropping us some hints or covered very, very briefly of what you've experienced with dark arts.
Okay.
So now to delve deeper into your experiences, how has dark arts affected you? Was it more positive or more negative?
Okay. It was definitely more negative. Let me put that out first. The positive was I got what I wanted. Okay, I like reading. You know, I love science fiction. Like I said, I love science fiction, fantasy are my favorites. Of course, then the spy novels and all of that, and adventure and such. But those are my top. You know, and so especially when you go into deep science fiction, you know, you got all the mathematics involved. I started reading. I love reading Stephen Hawking's. You know, I love science, but I couldn't understand, and I'm bad at mathematics. I mean, I'm ridiculously bad at mathematics. You have no idea. I have a problem with a calculator and mathematics. Okay, but here I want to understand Stephen Hawking. I want to understand his calculations. I want to understand all that's behind that. You know, and so then of course, due to my size, you know, sometimes I was in a school where there's a lot of bullying and all that. So I was like, you know what? I want to be stronger than everybody. I want to do things others can't do, you know. And so I would do those sacrifices, you know, make those deals. And so it came to a point I could understand and explain to you Stephen Hawking's equations. Not just understand it, but break it down and explain it to you. You know, definitely got stronger. I mean, I was lifting weights, but you know, there's only so much weights can do. You know. I would jump off a two-story building on concrete, get up and do it again, over and over again, no damage, nothing, you know. So the positive was I got those things, what I wanted generally. I remember one time, I think I was 15, and I just remember this, my dad, you know, he just goes off the wall and he's drunk or something, and for no reason I got a beating, and I was really upset. I was in the room, and I went to my room, and I was like, you know what? Fed up of this. I want to be stronger. I don't want to feel anything. I want to get numb. I don't want to feel anything. And so I actually still have the scar here a bit. It's quite faded. It's been a long time, and I really cut deep and, you know, pulled out pieces of flesh and made a deal. And yeah, I did. I became numb. I became more numb, so to say, emotionally. You know, I got what I wanted. So I just mentioned the positives. Now let me tell you about the negatives. They took more than they gave. When you make a deal with the spiritual realm, they will, other than God gives more than he takes. When you make deal with the other spirits, with the demonic, you know, they will take more than they give. And they will never tell you that. They will never imply that. They'll always be like, yeah, you got to get more. But it's not. In my case, they would disturb me when I was sleeping. You know, sometimes they would sayang me to sleep. And sometimes if I'm like sleepy and I don't want to get up and have them, they would twist my arm or hit me, you know, or choke me, or, you know, whatever, encouraged me to suicide. When you feel down, they would start speaking in your head. You don't hear voices, but it's an emotional thing where your own voice speaks to you, and they access that. The Bible calls it fiery darts, fiery arrows, and they shoot these thoughts into your head. You know what? Life is hopeless. There's no hope for you. Better to die. Just think, it's much better if you die. There is no hope. There is no way out. So became very much more suicidal. Affected my mind. There are whole periods of my life before salvation which are blank. Till now, I meet old friends, haven't seen for years, all that, and say, yeah, remember I saw you here and you were doing this. I was like, no, cannot be. And they're like, no, and there's witnesses. So it's not them saying, there's other people backing them up. And it's like, okay, whole periods of my life just a blank. Made me very violent, extremely violent. I won't go into more details on that, but very interesting. Affected my relationships, just everything. Other areas of my life was messed up. So I got what I wanted, but they took more. They didn't just take my blood. They didn't just take the sacrifice. They take your life. So
That was a very chilly story. But now to lead into the question, my first time hearing you preach, right, was a few years back when we had a camp. And I think that time you just returned from Cambodia and we had a camp. And what happened was you told us, I was very, very intrigued by what you were sharing. Not because of the message you were sharing, but because of a very, very short story you were sharing. But it was about how you used to read about 700 plus pages per week.
Yeah.
And we read a lot, but I'm pretty sure if you combine both of our readings per week, it wouldn't equate to that.
Okay.
So that was a lot, and we were both very, very impressed. Then you mentioned that once you got saved, you threw away your books, you got rid of your books. And you mentioned before that it's not wrong to read or watch fantasy, but where do you draw the line?
Okay. For me was, you want to read the Bible because that's going to give you the understanding of God. If you know who Jesus is, and that's how God also speaks. So He just doesn't speak to us through sermons, He speaks to us through the Word of God. That's why it's called the Word of God. And so I was like, I need to read my Bible to know more, because I'm coming from that completely other tangent where I barely know anything about God, and so I need to know more about God. I need to know how to get my life in order and such. I needed to read it, but I wasn't, because I was reading. I opened my Bible, I started reading, I'd get bored, and I got all my books there, and so I would just take it out and start reading, and so it just came to a point I was like, this is not working out. This is just not working out. I need to read my Bible, and also I didn't know what to do with those books, because there was a lot of books there that were demonic. There were books there that actually had spirits in it. If you touch the book and you pull it out, you'd feel something. Okay, and some were second-hand books, and also I don't know what was done, and many of it was stolen. And so I was like, what do I do with this? I don't want to give it to someone and give them something that's going to hurt their life. And it's like, neither can I keep it, because it's keeping me away from reading the Word of God. So I just got rid of it all. I just got rid of it all and started reading the Bible. And a few years later, once I got to know God better, I got stronger spiritually. Quite a few years later, when I got stronger spiritually and I knew the Word of God much more and was much more stable. I have more dominion of where I give my time to reading the Bible and have time to read other things. Then I started reading other books again. So now I do read other books, and such. So the line is, if it's keeping you away from God, it's keeping you away from your relationship with God, it's keeping you away from knowing God more, then that's the line. If it's going to draw you away from God, that's the line. If it's not, if it's just, you can still read that stuff and spend time with that, and it's not affecting your relationship with God and how you serve God and your time with God and your knowledge of God and all of that, then it's not an issue.
Now, in a popular series that we both like, it's called Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
And in that series, we saw the characters saying magical words, spells, like for example, Wingardium Leviosa
Okay.
will make this mug float
Okay.
in the air. So, can you tell us, can you use the dark arts to affect other people? Like, for example, voodoo dolls or hypnotism?
Yes, you can. Like I mentioned earlier, there's people that do that, so it can be done. Whether Harry Potter, those rituals there are real, or I know there's a big controversy going on, where it's like, oh, these are really real words, real magical spells, and then there's another segment that's like, it's not. And so I have no idea. As far as I know, it's always intent. So if you read, like I said, just maybe just words that are rowling, right? They get Rowling put inside there. So, but yes, you can affect the physical through. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, now that you're talking about it, there were times where actually I was able to make things move but it didn't happen very often. It didn't happen very often. It hardly happened, but it has happened. It can be done. So it can and as like I mentioned, I do know people who have put spells on others and cursed them.
Well, in
On that tangent, on that note, the problem with putting a curse on someone else, there's a higher price behind it that eventually plays out with the person who put the curse, family or something. It will kind of rebound back. It'll affect that person, but the consequences of putting that curse is much. Remember, I said the devil will take much more than he gives. So he will give that, but then on this side, this person's family or themselves find themselves more cursed later on.
So does the effect of the dark arts still affect you now?
No, not at all. The day I got set free when I accepted Jesus into my life, I got completely set free. I didn't know how free until about a year over later. I someone had invited me to church. I'd come, and then I went to the altar. I said the sinner's prayer, accepted Jesus into my life, and immediately after that, I wasn't stopped feeling I stopped feeling suicidal. After that, got delivered from all my the addictions, which were many, and I didn't realize how much God had set me free and how much that prayer affected, and the intent behind it when I went was a year after I got saved. I was in church and during service, and one of the older Christians in church, this person had been in church about maybe 12 years or so longer than me. Okay, he was a kind of a leader in the church, involved in ministry and such, and he started manifesting in church. He just plain out started manifesting, screaming and rolling and all that stuff, and the pastor had to pray for him, and he got delivered. And I'm watching that, and fear came upon me because suddenly it struck me. I never manifested. Nobody prayed for me to be delivered, and I knew I had demons in me. You don't move something with your mind without having something. You don't jump off a 2-story building onto concrete and not have any damage and do it over and over again. And that's just some of the stuff. And so I was like, nobody prayed for me to get delivered. Are these things still in me? Are they still there? And so I got and I started praying. Every day I just praying, God, how come I never manifested? How come nobody prayed for me to be delivered? Are these things still there? What's going on? And for weeks I was crying out to God and praying, and crying out to God, and one day during morning prayer, if I'm not mistaken, God speaks to me, and he's just like, you know what, you're completely set free. And what God said was that the day I came to the altar, the time I came to the altar, I had made a wholehearted decision for God. God, you know what, I don't want my old life anymore. I don't want the benefits that come with those things. I don't want anything. I just want you. I want a new life. I want to be set free. I want to have a relationship with you. I want to make heaven my home. I want all of this. So I give it all to you, God. Save me, deliver me. I believe what you did on the cross for my sins. You died on the cross for my sins. Shed your blood on Calvary's cross for my sins. And I accept it. As you come to my life, change my life, help me. And that's all it that's all it took. Intent. I came with that God, and that's all. That's all it took for those demonic spirits to disappear from my life, to get kicked out. No prayer, no someone laying, a whole bunch of people laying hands over me, with me rolling on the ground. And usually when you see someone having to be sometimes you will see that over time, when people come and then they manifest, and people are praying for them and they don't get delivered. The reason they don't get delivered is many a times they want to hold on. There's something that they have gotten from the demonic that they don't want to release. In my case, I was willing to release everything. And I don't need to understand Stephen Hawkins anymore, and I don't. I'm back to being the mad ungenius I am, which I don't care, doesn't bother me. I can call someone and ask them to do the mathematics for me. And that's what friends are for. And I was like, I don't want those things anymore. I don't need to be super strong anymore. I don't want to be able to jump off buildings and have completely no fear of heights, no vertigo whatsoever. Looking down from the top of Manara MPPJ right at the edge, looking down 26 stories, and wow, this is cool. And and I don't need those things. I don't need those things. I don't want those things. I want God. I want to be set free. But people who generally manifest a lot and don't get delivered, they want to hold back. They want to keep something. So yes, Jesus set me free. No effects.
That's very, very, very powerful and very relieving to hear.
Yes.
And now, after you got saved, what are the changes that you saw in your life?
Peace of mind. Dominion over my mind and my thoughts. I don't have the demonic. Sometimes he throws in a thought. Fairy dust goes into everybody's minds, but it's not so easy for him to access the mind of a Christian. The darts come in and it's like, you know what, you pray against it, and it goes before you can do anything you want. And the thought, it just doesn't do anything. It just catches a flame in the mind, and your whole mind is consumed by that. So I've got dominion over my thoughts, my emotions, much more dominion over it. Of course, we still get emotional. We are people. Same with our thoughts. Sometimes it does get carried away, but it's not so easy for the demonic to access it anymore. Assurance of going to heaven, deliverance from addictions, easier to say no to certain things.
Now, finally, our last and final question, because this is a talk show for the youth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any messages for the youth who may be involved or unknowingly affected by the dark arts?
Come to church. That's all I can say. That's what helps. Okay, God's the only one that can help us with that. The demonic, once it has a hold on you, it's very hard for you to get that hold released. Like I said, for me, it was so, as much involved as I was in it, was so easy to get released. All it took was a prayer, the intent, like, I just want deliverance. Nothing, I didn't even know I was delivered, and I was. And for those that are interested in getting involved in such, I wouldn't. The repercussions are much, much worse than any benefit you will reap. You will get what you ask for, but he will take much, much, much more than you ever expect. So don't get involved. And if you are and you want to be delivered, I think there's a phone number. Is there a phone number on this or something?
In the description.
Call that number. Someone will speak to you and help you out, and speak to you and help you out through whatever you're going through. If you even want more information, you can call them up and they will speak to you.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor Adrian, for coming on this talk show. Don't forget, tomorrow we have Sunday morning services at 10:30 a.m. and evening services at 7 p.m. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow us at cfm.pj on Instagram and our website, cfmasia.com.
So once again, we'd like to thank you. It was a
Welcome.
very, very, I think this episode went on longer than planned, but the content was very, very interesting. We were definitely very, very interested and enlightened by having you here.
Welcome.
So For that, the plugin has been done. So we thank you guys for watching this episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys in our next episode.
Okay.
Oh my god.